Good morning, and welcome to this new day and to the Sunday morning service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of San Miguel Allende. I am the Reverend Tom Rosiello, affiliate minister of the fellowship, and on behalf of all its members, I welcome you. We're glad you're part of our virtual community this morning. Of course, we cannot again this week gather in person, but we are together this morning in spirit. This Sunday to celebrate Earth Day and reflect upon its particular meaning in these times. The seventh principle of Unitarian Universalism is the respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are part. At this moment, COVID-19 has brought that recognition of the interdependent web into striking focus. But this virus represents only one challenge of many to our relationship with all beings on our planet. Today we'll explore the wisdom of our times and that of many ancient faith traditions that remind us of our calling to care for this planet and to respect and to protect that interdependent web. We begin our service this week, as we do each week, by lighting our chalice. The flaming chalice is a symbol of Unitarian Universalism. As Malcolm lights our chalice this morning, I wish to share with you words from the Reverend Audrey Vincent. We light the chalice this morning for Earth, our home, Earth abundant, source of what was before we were and will be after we are gone. May we know Earth, our mother of old, as our friend. May we know her fate as ours. Blessed is our bondedness to Earth. Blessed is our bondedness to all life. Blessed is our bondedness to the source of life itself. invite you to join in singing hymn number 21, For the Beauty of the Earth. The words will appear on your screen.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of San Miguel de Allende, a great place to be together on Sunday. I'm Dan Newspiel, your fellowship's president. Here you can bring your entire self, your full identity, your questioning mind, and your heart to share safely in fellowship, reflection, and great music. No matter where you're from, or where you are right now, whether you celebrated religious traditions or not, you're welcome here. I have some items from our fellowship's COVID-19 task force. Cases are still increasing in San Miguel de Allende and Guanajuato, so we now need to take the greatest precautions. We hope you've all been practicing good hand washing, social distancing, and masks when you are out, but the safest policy is to stay home. When you do need to leave the house, remember that keeping 2 meters apart from others is more effective than any mask. Please don't cheat on these guidelines. And remember, the virus won't come into your house by itself. You need to let it in. So be especially careful about people and objects that enter your home. If you have a regular doctor, please make contact with them to find out their preferred methods of communication. If you don't have a regular doctor, get one. If you haven't yet read the home care guide that I mentioned last week, please do so. The supply list near the beginning of the guide is especially important for your preparations. The guide is accessible at our UUFSMA website and in the COVID-19 Task Force tab that you'll see on that front page. The fellowship is keeping track of trusted emergency contact information of our members, especially those who live alone. If you've not yet provided it or want it updated, please contact Denise at the email in your chat box. Please keep up with the news on the SMA COVID-19 Facebook page, since information about the pandemic is constantly changing. A few other announcements. Are you interested in joining one of our Zoom discussion groups? Or do you have any feedback about this Sunday's service? If so, contact Diana Amaya at the email in the chat box. Many of us miss our time for socializing after the service. Though we can't offer coffee and cookies, we're going to try something new today to simulate coffee hour. At the end of this service, those of you who are interested should stay connected for a few minutes. You'll be randomly assigned to breakout groups of 4 or 5 viewing sites each to chat with each other for up to 15 minutes. Please share your thoughts with new and old friends and let us know how it goes. Now we go to Tom and Diego for our fellowship's covenant.
I invite you now to join in the covenant both in English and Spanish. The words will appear on your screen momentarily. We respect the interdependent web of life and work for a just and peaceful world. We encourage the search for truth and meaning, strive for compassion in our relationships, and seek values that will benefit our lives and the lives of others. This is our covenant.
Respetamos todos los estilos de vida dentro de su red interdependiente y trabajamos por un mundo justo y pacífico. Alentamos la búsqueda de la verdad y la comprensión total. Nos esforzamos por mantener la compasión en nuestras relaciones y buscamos valores que beneficien nuestras vidas y las vidas de los demás. Este es nuestro convenio.
This is a very sacred time now in our service, a time when we share significant joys, sorrows, and concerns with our community. We cannot do this in person, and people have sent me theirs, and I will share them. Also, you can share briefly by typing yours into the chat column on your screen. Just a few months ago, Emily Upham was here in San Miguel with us at the fellowship on Sunday morning and looking forward to returning to San Miguel to make a home here. Unfortunately, when she got back to New York, it was discovered that a cancer that she had been treated for had returned with a vengeance, and she passed away this past week. She was an extremely gifted pianist who was looking forward to connecting with the music community here in San Miguel. At the request of Nora Cohen and several others of you, we light a candle of sorrow in her memory. The young Mexican opera singer, Gerardo de la Torre, from the Bel Canto program here in San Miguel, is doing much better. You'll remember he got a scholarship to the Manhattan School of Music, and when he returned from New York to Mexico, he realized that he had the virus, became very ill, and was hospitalized and put on a ventilator. Well, this past Wednesday, he was removed from the ventilator, is breathing on his own, recovering, and even sending out emails. We light a candle of gratitude and joy for him and his family. At the request of Roanna Lang and several of our Canadian members, we light a candle of deep sorrow for all those killed in the mass shooting in Nova Scotia last week, and of support for their family and friends and communities who are grieving deeply. We also acknowledge with gratitude all the incredible expressions of love and compassion that have been offered to those affected by the tragedy. We light a candle now for all those who are suffering from mental illness in our community and beyond, and finding the stress of this particular time difficult. We pray for peace and healing for them. Again, this week we light a candle for the courageous people, from healthcare workers to grocery store cashiers, from sanitation workers to funeral directors, who, in doing their essential jobs, put themselves at risk. And finally, we light a candle for all those joys, sorrows, and concerns that you have typed into the chat column, and for all those that remain unexpressed this morning, but are held deeply in our hearts. I invite you now to carry them with you into a time of silent prayer and meditation, guided by the beautiful music of Edward McDowell, which Paula will play.
This fellowship strives to be loving to each other and to the larger community. At this time in the service, you often hear us say that we donate over half of our revenue to nonprofit organizations that benefit our Mexican neighbors living in poverty. Today, I'm going to talk about the other half. You may consider these services as free or fully paid for through the generous pledges that many of you give. You would be wrong. Our minister, administrative staff, and audio technician have been working tirelessly to bring Sunday services and Zoom discussion groups to you. In this time of great stress, our minister, Tom, provides much assistance to individual members in need. All of these have costs, and in creating our annual budget, we count on your generosity at Sunday services to supplement our annual pledge collections, so that we may meet these costs. If you've been viewing our excellent Sunday services for the past month without making a donation, you now have the opportunity to catch up. At our donate link, which you can find in the chat box or at our website, UUFSMA.org, that's UUFSMA.org, You can use PayPal or any credit or debit card to donate any amount starting at $1. If you want your donation to go toward your pledge or to our minister's discretionary fund, please indicate this in the notes section of your donation. Otherwise, it will be credited to our general collections to help meet some of the expenses that I described, as well as supporting the local Mexican community. And thank you for your generosity. Now, back to Paula.
Our first reading this morning comes to us from the Native American tradition and is attributed to Chief Seattle. Every part of this earth is sacred to my people. Every shining pine needle, every humming insect, all are holy in the memory and experience of my people. We know the sap which courses through the trees as we know the blood which courses through our veins. We are part of the earth, and it is part of us. The perfumed flowers are our sisters, the bear, the deer, the great eagle. These are our brothers. The shining water that moves in the streams and rivers is not just water, but the blood of our ancestors. The waters murmur in the voice of my father's father. The rivers are our brothers. They quench our thirst. They carry our canoes and feed our children. So you must give to the river the kindness you would give to any brother. This we know. The earth does not belong to us. We belong to the earth. All things are connected, like the blood that unites a family. We do not weave the web of life. We are merely a strand of it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. And now to Dan for our second reading.
This reading comes from the article, "The Pandemic is Not a Natural Disaster" by Kate Brown. It appeared recently in the New Yorker magazine. In the old days, that is, a few weeks ago, I would often share my mornings with my neighbor Wesley. We'd greet each other with a hug, then head across the street to the garden plot we share in a leafy neighborhood of Washington, D.C. The garden used to be a landfill left behind when a row of houses was bulldozed a few decades ago. Over many months, we've improved the soil with kitchen compost and leaf mulch inhabited by a mob of microbes, insects, and worms. During this year's unseasonably warm spring, we planted some seedlings and harvested kale and mustard, then prepared a fresh salad for lunch. Wes and I have grown close through these routines, even though we share little in common other than a small tuft of urban territory. Most of the metaphors we have for talking about our biological world do not match this model of cooperation. Darwinian thought teaches us the concept of never-ending competition between the fit and the unfit. Abrahamic religions tell us that human beings were given the earth and its creatures to rule. American mythology encourages entrepreneurial individualism. But Wesley and I do not compete for space in our small raised garden bed. Instead, we share microbes from the air and the soil, expelling them on our breaths and wiping them into our hands and later ingesting them. With our actions, we form a community in both a social and microbial sense. Microbial webs have bridged the spaces between human beings and other species for all of our history. Long before anyone knew what a single-cell organism was, cultural practices maximized the exchange of microbes as people farmed, foraged, tended livestock, fermented their food, dipped their hands in common bowls, and greeted one another with a touch. They engaged in rituals that bound them together with their neighbors and other organisms. This was probably not accidental. A wealth of evidence shows that when we share microbes with other people and organisms, we become healthier, better adapted to our environments, and more in sync as a social unit. The interconnectedness of our biological lives, which has become even clearer in recent decades, is pushing us to reconsider our understanding of the natural world. Biologists have begun questioning the idea that each tree is an individual. It might be more accurately understood as a node in a network of underworld exchanges between fungi, roots, bacteria, lichen, insects, and other plants. The network is so intricate that it's difficult to say where one organism ends and the other begins. Our picture of the human body is shifting too. It seems like a self-contained vessel, defined by one's genetic code and ruled by a brain, than a microbial system that sweeps along in atmospheric currents, harvesting gases, bacteria, phages, fungal spores, and airborne toxins in its nets. In the midst of the coronavirus outbreak, this idea of a body as an assembly of species, a community, seems newly relevant and unsettling. How are we supposed to protect ourselves if we are so porous? Are pandemics inevitable when living things are bound so tightly together in a dense planetary sphere? The history of civilization has hinged on the building and demolition of boundaries between species. Early agriculture disregarded most of the natural world in order to cultivate only the most productive plants and animals. This allowed populations to grow and cities to flourish. But crops and livestock, once they were concentrated in one place and cultivated in monocultures, became vulnerable to disease. As cities and farm operations grew, people and animals crowded closer together. The result was a new epidemiological order in which zoonotic diseases, ones that could jump from animals to humans, thrived. Barns packed with animals are good places to breed pathogens. Monocultures, in which all animals are genetically similar, offer few speed bumps to transmission. You got 50,000 chickens in a barn, Rob Wallace, the author of Big Farms Make Big Flu, told me. They're all genetically the same, and you're growing them for a turnaround time of 6 weeks. This is all food for flu. Within the uniform predictability of modern agriculture, the unpredictable emerges. Zoonotic diseases can seem like earthquakes. They appear to be random acts of nature. In fact, they're more like hurricanes. They can occur more frequently and become more powerful if human beings alter the environment in the wrong ways. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention estimates that 3/4 of the new or emerging diseases that infect human beings have originated in wild or domesticated animals. In addition to the familiar pathogens, Ebola, Zika, avian flu, swine flu, researchers have counted around 200 other infectious diseases that have broken out more than 12,000 times over the past 3 decades. It's no small feat to cross the species barrier. These numbers speak to the scale of our agricultural system. The pandemic is an unfolding global tragedy. It's also an occasion for thinking, in broad terms, about the currents in which we swim. The philosopher Emmanuel Kochia argues that we inhabit not Earth, but the atmosphere, which he describes as a sea of life. As swimmers in this sea, we cannot be biologically isolated. Neither can our ecological practices. Researchers have found that antibiotic-resistant microbes from animal feces float downwind from Texas feedlots. Pesticides from tropical banana plantations end up in chilly Lake Superior. The spores that caused the 2001 outbreak of foot and mouth disease in Britain may have been stirred up by dust storms in the Sahara. And yet, those same storms help deliver nourishing phosphorus to the Amazon rainforest. The air helps pollinate our plants. It also transports radioactive particles, fungal spores, bacteria, and viruses. Self-isolation is key if we are to stop the pandemic, and yet the need for isolation is in itself an acknowledgement of our deep integration with our surroundings. To fully respond to what's happened, we need to reflect on the worldwide ecological networks that bind us all together. Wesley and I will resume our work of growing and harvesting when this pandemic ends. I hope that we'll be joined by others all over the globe who are eager to tend the community garden that is our world. Now to Malcolm.
I invite you now to join in hymn number 134, Our World is One World. The words will appear on your screen.
Touches one affects us all. The seas that wash us round about, the clouds that cover us, the rains that fall. Our world is one world. The thoughts we think affect us all. The way we build our attitudes with love or hate we make a bridge or wall. affect us all. The way we spend, the way we share, who are the rich or poor, who stand or fall. Our world is one world, just like a ship that bears us all, where fear and greed make many holes, but where our hearts can hear a different call.
In spite of all the boundaries and separations that we imagine, that we try to impose, our world, as we just sang, is one world, one ecosystem, one great community. And indeed, what touches one affects us all. We are part of the interdependent web of all existence, not conqueror or lord over the natural world, but a strand in a web of existence interdependent with all the other strands. One boat carries us all, but in the words of our hymn that we just sang, a boat where fear and greed make many holes, but still where our hearts can hear a different call. A call expressed in this morning's words from the Native American tradition, and expressed in the profound insight from the world of science that Dan offered in the second reading. A call reflected in the seventh principle of our faith, a call to recognize our kinship, our oneness, our interconnectedness, our interdependence with all existence. Today we must also recognize how in the name of progress, in the practice of putting profits ahead of all else, we are damaging and disrupting the interdependent web of existence in ways that are having real and serious consequences. Not just the continuing rise of CO2 in our atmosphere caused by our reliance on fossil fuels, not just the resulting climate change that has brought about uncontrollable fire and flood and other severe weather, but also in the way we raise our food, our diets, the proximities in which we live with other members of the web, which can result in a virus crossing from one species to another. As Kate Brown expressed in the article that Dan read, we are looking at this pandemic now as a public health crisis. And of course, it is that. But it is part of something much larger, part of something that will not go away when we find a vaccine to this particular virus. The COVID-19 pandemic is an ecological crisis, an environmental crisis. The tragic spread of this virus brings new focus to what the human impact on our environment is doing to the fragile web of existence. It calls us to rethink our ideas of the human being in relationship to all existence. We need to think of saving our planet just not at the macro level of rising sea levels and air pollution, but also at the micro level, at the level of the microbial web of life that connects all species, including human beings. In fact, we need to reconceive of how we think of the human body. We need to move away from that image of a self-contained vessel with a genetic code and ruled by a brain to think of our bodies as a microbial ecosystem, an assembly of species, a community within communities. We need to realize that when we alter our environment, when we disrupt the balance, whether by emitting fossil fuel gases or through the mass production of food by large unnatural commercial farming, there are consequences, not just to the planet, but also within our bodies. We have wonderful science today, and I know that better treatment and hopefully very soon a vaccine will be developed to save lives. But that doesn't solve the real problem. The coronavirus is yet another wake-up call to change the way we treat our planet and our fellow organisms, and to respect that interdependent web of life of which we are just one part. 50 years ago this week, after many years of efforts to get politicians and the general public to pay some attention to our environmental concerns, the first Earth Day, an officially recognized day to focus awareness on what is happening to our planet and how we humans are treating her, was celebrated. Since that first Earth Day, a lot has happened. The scientific world has indisputably proven the Earth is warming, the climate is changing, and we humans are the cause of it. We have witnessed one natural disaster and crisis after another, including this current pandemic, all demonstrating what our failure to respect the interdependent web of existence has wrought. Yes, some positive steps towards saving our planet and reducing the man-made impact on the delicate balance of the natural world have taken place. But do we take seriously this idea that our faith is linked to the fate of the earth and that we are connected to all creatures? We see the rather slow effect of fossil fuels degrading our planet, directly and indirectly affecting people's lives. We hear about the dangers of the way we produce our food and the possible risks that might impose, but I think we've not really connected the dots. I believe that for most of us, a deep understanding of our interconnectedness and the interdependence of the web has been lacking. What has come home to us in an incredibly harsh and fast way is that this pandemic we are now in the midst of is not some freakish and unexplainable natural disaster, but an environmental disaster that was waiting to happen. To think that the U.S. has withdrawn from the Paris Agreement and the fact that the administration continues to relax standards that were put in place to protect the environment is very disheartening. It is encouraging, however, to see that for the first time ever, a major political candidate for the U.S. presidency identified climate change as the #1 most pressing issue facing us. Yet still, I'm not sure that most of us really get it at a deep level, at the level of good science, but also at the level of a profound spirituality. Science may find one fix, one vaccine, one temporary solution after another, and that's wonderful. But I'm talking about really getting it at a spiritual level, at the level of a profound change in our orientation as to the way that we approach the world, at the level of the heart, at the level of moral and ethical principles that guide us, at the level of faith, that is, at the level of the fundamental beliefs about our place in this world and our duty to live in right relationship with our planet and with all our fellow organisms. Today, the words you heard read and some that you describe a relationship to our planet and to the natural world as one of kinship. The earth is our mother, the sky our father, the animals, the rivers, the plants, our sisters and brothers. We certainly identify that sort of language with the Native American tradition, as well as other earth-centered spiritual traditions. But like our Native American tradition, in Eastern traditions such as Buddhism and Hinduism, nature itself is divine, with rights equal or just superior to man. There is a pantheistic rather than a monotheistic worldview. God or the holy is not outside of the realm of nature, but in nature. Here one is not in struggle against nature, but instead makes their peace with God by making their peace with nature. In these traditions, the earth deserves reverence. It is not viewed in any of these traditions as something that is for the exclusive use and abuse of humans, but rather that we are part of an interconnected web. On the other hand, in the Western Jewish and Christian traditions in which many of us were raised and our own tradition has its roots, the creation story of Genesis has been interpreted to say that the earth and all its resources and plants and animals were just created for the benefit of human beings. Ours is the earth to do with it what we will. Genesis 1:28, in fact, tells humans to subdue the earth and have dominion over it. Well, there's certainly much more to this Genesis creation story. However, beginning with the Enlightenment of the late 17th and 18th century, this was the part of the story that was emphasized. In that time, philosophers taught that the human journey was one of progress moving away from the dangerous wilderness of the natural world. In the U.S., that position became solidified in the experience of the early settlers. Life was hard, and therefore nature was perceived as the adversary to be conquered. Unlike the Native Americans with whom they co-occupied the continent, the early settlers saw the human being as separate from and above other creation. God was not in nature but separate and apart. In the good times, when the natural world was not their enemy, it was their instrumentality to use in any way they saw fit. Theirs certainly was not a green faith. These ideas, although not often directly articulated today, are, I fear, still rooted deeply in the fabric of our society and in our churches and in our government. But there is another side of the story in the Western tradition as well. The same message of kinship with the earth that we see in the Native Americans and in the Eastern traditions is there too. It's actually been there for a long time. The 12th century Catholic saint Francis of Assisi referred to the sun as his brother and the moon as his sister, and expressed that very same kinship with all creation that Native Americans do. And if we return to the creation story found in Genesis with different eyes, we see the human is an intricate part of a whole creation. You may remember in that story that Adam, the first human, is recreated from a bit of topsoil, as are the flora and the fauna. Microbes, right? You gardeners are familiar with the word humus. Its similarity to the word human is no mistake. The rich dirt from which the human was made is humus. Elsewhere, too, in the Bible, there are many places where we can draw out an eco-theology. Noah's preservation of the species, Isaiah's sharp critique of the Assyrians for destroying an old-growth forest in Lebanon, Ezekiel denouncing the pollution of a river, to name just a few. This week, the month-long observation of Ramadan begins. Islam, the third of the Abrahamic faiths, is a powerful force in guiding how many people, millions of people, live their lives today. Recently, I've learned that one can find an environmental mandate in that Muslim tradition. I've learned that some scholars consider the Quran to be greener than the Bible. We're probably all familiar with the Islamic word Sharia, which we know refers to a code of laws that we probably think is rather repressive. But did you know it literally means source of water? Islamic cleric Iman al-Hilali writes that Islam forbids wasting water, and that preserving water is a form of worship that gives pleasure to Allah. He understands Islam to teach that all living things are partners to humans, and they deserve their own respect. He goes as far as to call the earth the the very same thing that the Native Americans did, our first mother. So what I'm suggesting to you is that in all our varied faith traditions, there are teachings which provide a basis for an earth-saving faith, one that recognizes the interdependent web of all existence and charges its followers to do a duty of care to preserve it. Well, why worry, you may say, about what the Bible or the Quran or any other ancient religious book has to teach about our relationship to the earth? Well, to start with, it's part of what got us to this point where we have abused the earth, and certainly for some today, perhaps many, the authority of Scripture is still their most compelling warrant. Maybe you're saying, let's just stick to science. And of course, science is important. For some, it's all that's needed. Science provides a rational, intellectual reason to act, where faith provides a moral, theological mandate. Science speaks more to the head, but an earth-saving faith speaks more to the heart and the conscience. I think what we need is both if we are to save our planet. Most of us don't require a biblical mandate for our action, but we do need deeply rooted convictions supported by a philosophy or a theology of right relationship with our planet and its creatures. I believe we need to do more than just reason about the problem. We need inspiration. We need to ground ourselves in a system of beliefs that can move us from viewing our relationship to the environment as one of dominance over to one of kinship with. When at our core we have accepted that kind of understanding, then our behavior will be that of participation, cooperation, respect, and reverence for that interconnected web. Environmental policies to stop climate change, to save the earth, to change how we raise food won't be grudgingly accepted because we know at a rational level that it's necessary to survive, but will be joyfully embraced as the only morally right thing to do. I'm proud to say that this is not a new idea to Unitarian Universalism. As most of you know, our seventh principle, in it we explicitly agree to affirm and promote respect for the interdependent web of existence of which we are a part. Although that principle was only formally stated in the 1980s, we have been articulating a progressively greener theology for a long time. Emerson, Thoreau, and the other Unitarian transcendentalists saw divinity in nature and tried to live in harmony with, rather than in opposition to, the natural world. You know, perhaps the reason that Thoreau's experience at Walden Pond is so important both in American literature and philosophical tradition is that at the time when most Americans felt the need to tame and subdue nature, he presented a model of living simply with nature, harmoniously and cooperatively. Thoreau was preaching sustainable living not as a specific response to environmental destruction, but as a divine calling and a theological understanding of the interconnected web of life. The inseparable oneness with the earth and with all things, that kinship with the earth and its creatures, that recognition of the human being as not so much a self-contained vessel, but a microbial ecosystem, all of them are profoundly theological understandings about the nature of being, as well as scientifically supportable facts. But we have to do more than just believe in our interconnectedness to all creation. We have to be drawn from a deep place to speak out and to act. An earth-saving faith must be an embodied theology, one that we express through our daily actions, one that guides our daily living and our public engagement. The scale of the problem that affects our environment can seem overwhelming. It can be difficult to comprehend how it is that anything we do can possibly make a difference. But if we recognize our interconnectedness with all creation in a deeply spiritual way, such that the concept becomes a guiding force in our lives, then we will make decisions in our daily lives that make a difference. In those famous words of Gandhi, we will be the change we want for the world. There will continue to be powerful and short-sighted economic and political issues that stand in the way of creating a greener planet. But the voices of people who at a deep level of faith have accepted their kinship with Earth, their oneness with all creation, will be a formidable force in the political debate to save our planet and restore the balance of the interdependent web of existence at the level of the macro world and the microbial world as well. We will pass through this time of pandemic, and good science will lead the way. But the challenge to us all will be a deeper one of a fundamental change in how we see ourselves in relationship to what is all around us. A change in how we relate to our brothers and sisters in the natural world, even the microbial ones. I am hopeful that yet another wake-up call will move us in that direction so we can preserve the beauty and integrity of our first mother, Earth, and all her creation, and make for a world where we truly respect our oneness with all. In our final hymn, we conclude with a tribute to Earth's beauty. It is an unusual hymn, the only hymn I know of based on a science fiction novel. Kim Oler wrote the hymn for Paul Winter's Missa, Gaia, based on a science fiction story of a blind poet on the shuttle for Venus, expressing his yearning to return once again to appreciate the beauty of Earth. As we commit ourselves with new resolve to see ourselves differently in relation to the fragile, interconnected web of all existence and to act accordingly, we join in that song of tribute. Hymn number 163, For the Earth Forever Turning. The words will appear on your screen shortly, and Malcolm will lead you in singing.
For the earth forever turning, for the skies for every sea, for our lives, for all we cherish, sing we our joyful song of peace. For the mountains, hills, and pastures in their silent majesty, for the stars, for all the heavens, sing we our joyful song of peace. For the sun, for rain and thunder, for the seasons' harmony, for our lives, for all creation, sing we our joyful praise to thee. For the world we raise our voices, for the home that gives us birth. In our joy we sing, rejoining home to our blue-green hills of earth.
Thank you for being with us for this service again this morning, and we hope you will join us again next week as we again gather at 10:30 via Zoom. To close, I'd like to return us to those words of Chief Seattle. This we know, the earth does not belong to us. We belong to the earth. Whatever befalls the earth befalls the sons and daughters of the earth. We did not weave the web of life. We are merely a strand in it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. I will now extinguish the flame, but not the light, that we carry with us as a guide for our week ahead.